I stood on the lawn of my sister's brand new graduation gift while clutching my own present, a 12-month gym membership that felt like a slap. Yet the chill running down my spine came from the mortgage papers on the kitchen table. The signature on the bottom line was mine, even though I had never touched that pen. I realized then that my family did not just favor her. They were using me as their shield. My name is Madison Hart, and at 34 years old, I evaluate threats for a living. As a risk compliance officer at Crown Ridge Capital Services in Tampa, my job is to look at a spreadsheet of numbers and spot the lie. But standing in the driveway of a pristine suburban home in Clearwater, surrounded by balloons and forced smiles, I failed to see the disaster standing right in front of me. This was my sister's graduation party. Brianna had finished her degree in communications 2 weeks ago, and my parents, Dale and Marjorie, had decided that a diploma deserved a permanent address. They stood on the porch, flanking Brianna like proud bodyguards, while she held up a set of keys that caught the afternoon sun. The guests applauded, a ripple of admiration for the generosity of the Hart family. Then came my turn. Mom waved me over, her smile tight and practiced. "We have something for you, too." "Madison," she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She handed me a small, flat box wrapped in silver paper. I opened it. Inside lay a plastic card. Ironclad Fitness. 12-month platinum membership. I stared at it. The implication was not subtle. It was a critique wrapped in a gift bow. "We know you've been busy with work," Mom said, leaning in close so only I could hear the venom in the honey. "And we want you to look your best. You know, for your health. You really should take better care of yourself." "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "This is really thoughtful." I stepped away, clutching the card that felt like a burning coal in my palm. I was trying to find a trash can for the wrapping paper when my Aunt Linda breezed past. Balancing a plate of cake, she paused, patting my arm with a little too much familiarity. "It is so wonderful what you did, honey," she whispered loudly. "I told your mother. It is a good thing your name is on the papers, too. It saves so much trouble with the lenders these days." She walked away before I could respond. I stood frozen on the paver stones. My name on the papers. The words bounced around my skull. I looked across the lawn at my parents. They were laughing, clinking champagne flutes. I remembered the electric bills I paid for them last winter. I remembered the $5,000 I transferred to clear their credit card debt 3 years ago so Dad could avoid a lien. I had always been the one who understood, the one who fixed things. "Picture time," someone shouted. Mom grabbed Brianna and Dad, arranging them in front of the oak door. I stepped toward them, assuming my place. "Oh, Madison," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively toward the edge of the porch. "Just move over a bit. A little more to the side. We want to get the house number in the shot." She kept nudging me until I was barely in the frame, my shoulder pressed against the rough stucco, looking like a stranger photobombing a happy family. When the applause died down, I slipped into the kitchen to get away from the humidity. The house smelled of fresh paint and expensive cleaning products. On the quartz island, right next to a platter of untouched shrimp, sat a thick manila envelope labeled "Closing Documents." I should have walked away, but my instincts were screaming. I walked over and lifted the corner of the top page. Borrower Brianna Hart, co-borrower M. Hart. My breath hitched. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I dropped the page as footsteps approached the kitchen, forcing a smile I did not feel. I left 10 minutes later, claiming a headache. I drove back to my rented apartment in silence, the air conditioner blasting against the sweat on my neck. When I got inside, I sat at my cheap laminate table and dumped the contents of the gym membership envelope out. The card fell out, but so did a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was an appointment slip for a mandatory health screening at a clinic I had never heard of. At the bottom was a QR code that looked strange, accompanied by a note printed in bold font. To activate membership, Scan to link vitality profile. It was not just a gift, it was a directive. Someone had prepared a path for me to walk down, and they had already started signing my name to maps I had never seen. I stared at the paper, and for the first time that night, I did not feel like a daughter. I felt like a target. The silence in my apartment was heavy, the kind that presses against your eardrums until you hear your own blood rushing. I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the stagnant air. But my mind was miles away, back in the humid, mosquito-thick evenings of my childhood in Lakeland. The dynamic had been set before I even knew how to tie my shoes. If Brianna broke a vase, it was because she was spirited and clumsy. If I forgot to take the trash out once, I was irresponsible. I remembered the mantra my father, Dale, used to repeat whenever I complained about the unfairness. He would look me in the eye, his face stern and unyielding, and say, "Madison, you are the older sister. You have to sacrifice. It is what family does, but sacrifice implies a choice, a noble giving of oneself." My life had been a series of mandatory extractions. I thought about my college years. I had worked double shifts at a diner, smelling of grease and cheap coffee, just to pay my tuition. I missed parties, I missed sleep, and I graduated with honors. My parents gave me a handshake. Meanwhile, Brianna's entire education was fully funded by them. When she managed to pass her classes with a C average, they threw her a gala dinner and told everyone how hard she had tried. They called her resilient. They called me self-sufficient, which was just their code word for not our problem. It was this training, this lifetime of navigating shifting standards, that made me good at my job. In risk compliance, you learn that people rarely lie about the big things first. They lie about the small details, the little inconsistencies that do not add up. And tonight, the math was wrong. I picked up my phone and called Tessa Callahan. She was the only person who knew the full ledger of my family history. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me you did not eat the shrimp," Tessa said, her voice tinny through the speaker. "I told you never eat the shrimp at a Glorious Heart family event. It is probably expired." "It is not the shrimp," I said, rubbing my temples. "It is the house. I saw papers on the counter, closing documents. I saw my first initial." There was a pause on the line. Then Tessa's voice dropped, losing its joking tone. "Mads, did you actually see the papers? Did you read them? Or did you just glance?" I glanced, I admitted. But the signature, it looked like mine. And then Mom pushed me out of the frame for the photo, and Aunt Linda said something about my name being on the paperwork. "You need to check your credit," Tessa said firmly. "Right now. Do not wait until morning." "I do not want to start a war if I am wrong," I whispered, more to myself than to her. If I accuse them of this, and I am wrong, they will never let me hear the end of it. "And if you are right," Tessa countered, "check it." He hung up. I wanted to believe I was paranoid. I wanted to believe that the toxicity of my family was just emotional, not criminal. But then my phone chimed. It was an automated email from my credit monitoring service. Alert new mortgage account opened. Inquiry from Sunhaven Mortgage Solutions. The air left my lungs. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. I dialed my mother's number before I could talk myself out of it. It was late, almost 11 at night, but I knew she would be up, basking in the afterglow of her perfect party. Madison Marjorie answered, sounding annoyed. "We are just cleaning up." "What is it, Mom?" I said, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "I just got an alert." "Why is there a mortgage inquiry on my credit report? Why is my name attached to Brianna's house?" The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear clinking dishes in the background. "Oh, stop it," she finally snapped, her tone dismissive. "We just needed a guarantor because Brianna's history is a little thin. It is just a formality. Don't make a big deal out of this. Not tonight. Do not ruin the one night your sister is actually happy." "You signed my name," I said, my voice shaking. "You forged my signature. We did what we had to do for the family," she hissed. "Go to sleep. Madison." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, looking at the black screen of my phone. They did not even deny it. They just reframed it. I was the older sister. I was the sacrifice. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating the dark room with a cold, blue light. I cracked my knuckles. I was not a daughter anymore. I was a compliance officer, and I had just found a major discrepancy. I began to type, logging into the public records database. If they wanted to use my name, they should have remembered that my name came with a specific set of skills. I was going to trace every penny. I sat in the glow of my monitor, treating my own life like a forensic audit. The credit report loaded line by line, a digital autopsy of my financial health. There, buried under a section for recent activity, was the hard inquiry I had dreaded finding. Sun Haven Mortgage Solutions. It was dated May 12th. I clicked to expand the details. The contact information associated with the application made my stomach turn. It listed an email address that looked familiar at first glance, but my compliance training kicked in, spotting the anomaly immediately. It was DART. Contracting. Eggmail. Com. My father's actual email was DART. Consulting. Eggmail. Com. They had changed a few letters, just enough to bypass a quick automated check, but close enough to claim a typo if caught. It was not a mistake. It was a strategy. The next morning, I walked into the local branch of the bank listed as the servicing lender. I approached the desk with my driver's license and a printout of the inquiry. The relationship manager, a man named Steve with a tie that was too short, looked at my ID and then at his screen. He frowned. "I see the mortgage," Steve said, tapping his keyboard. "But you are listed as a guarantor, Ms. Hart. The primary borrower is Brianna Hart. I cannot release the full origination file without her consent. It is my credit," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have a right to know what documents were submitted to justify this loan." "You would have to contact the broker," Steve said, sliding my ID back to me. "Sun Haven handles the paperwork. We just service the debt. If you have an issue with the origination, take it up with them." He was stonewalling me. I left the bank, the Florida heat hitting me like a physical weight. Back in my car, I picked up the gym membership card that was still sitting on my passenger seat. I remembered the mandatory health screening notice. I pulled out my phone and scanned the QR code. I expected it to take me to the gym's website. Instead, it redirected me to a generic landing page titled Vitality Benefits Portal. It asked for my social security number, my mother's maiden name, and my current address to verify coverage. I froze. This was not a health intake. It was a data harvesting site. If I entered my information, I would be handing them everything they needed to open more accounts, more credit cards, maybe even a personal loan. I called Tessa immediately. "It is a trap," I told her, watching the traffic pass by on the boulevard, the gym membership. "It is a way to get my updated data." "It is worse than that," Tessa said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through my panic. "Think about the optics. Madison, they gave you a gym membership publicly. If you start screaming about them stealing your identity, what are they going to say? They will tell everyone you are just jealous of Brianna's house. They will say you are lashing out because they told you to lose weight. The gym card, it discredits you before you even open your mouth." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "They built a narrative to bury me." "Exactly," Tessa said. "So you need proof. That is harder than a he said, she said argument." I drove home and went back to the mortgage data. I managed to pull the metadata for the electronic signature on the loan application. According to the log, Madison Hart had signed the document digitally on May 4th at 3 in the afternoon. I opened my calendar. On May 4th at 3 in the afternoon, I was at 30,000 feet, flying to a compliance conference in New Orleans. I dug through my travel folder and found the boarding pass. I had been on Delta Flight 1202. The plane did not have Wi-Fi. It was physically impossible for me to have signed that document. I scanned the boarding pass. I took screenshots of the flight logs. I downloaded the metadata report. I created a new encrypted folder on my hard drive and named it The Gift. I was just about to close my laptop when my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. Don't dig deep. Family is family. I stared at the screen. The air in my apartment felt suddenly thin. They knew. Someone was watching my credit alerts. Or maybe they had access to my email logs? I did not reply. I simply took a screenshot of the text and dragged it into the folder. They wanted me to be scared. They wanted me to be the good, quiet daughter who paid the bills and looked the other way. I dragged the folder into a secure cloud backup. I was done being the daughter. I was the risk officer now, and I had just opened a case file. The next afternoon, I drove back to the house in Clearwater. I told myself I was walking into a crime scene, not a family home. I parked behind Brianna's car and put on a mask of sisterly affection, carrying a potted orchid as a peace offering. Brianna opened the door, looking relieved to see me. She ushered me into the kitchen, chattering about paint swatches and furniture layouts. Mom and Dad said you would come around, Brianna said, arranging the orchid on the counter. They said you would be happy for me eventually. I mean, it is a big step. It is, I said, leaning against the island where the closing documents had been the night before. They were gone. It is a huge responsibility. The mortgage payments must be intense. Brianna's eyes darted to the floor. She started scrubbing a spot on the granite that was already clean. Oh, Dad handled the negotiations. He is really good at that stuff. Who signed for it? Brianna, I asked, keeping my voice low. I know you do not have the credit history for a prime rate loan. I do not know why you are asking me this, she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. Why can't you just... Let it be. I pulled open the junk drawer near the fridge, pretending to look for a napkin. There, shoved to the back, was the manila envelope. But next to it lay a set of keys with a neon yellow tag that read, Rental Unit B. My blood ran cold. This was not just a home for my sister. They were planning to lease out the accessory dwelling unit or a room. If they had applied for a primary residence mortgage but intended to generate rental income immediately without disclosing it, that was occupancy fraud. And they were doing it on my credit score. I reached for the envelope, but a heavy hand clamped down on my wrist. I jumped. Dale was standing behind me. He had come in through the garage, silent as a ghost. He snatched the envelope from my grip and shoved it into his jacket pocket. You have a good job, Madison, he said, his voice a low rumble. You make 6 figures. Do not be selfish. Your sister needs a head start. This is not a head start, I snapped, backing away. This is fraud. You forged my signature. We utilized family resources, Marjorie said, appearing from the hallway. She looked at the few relatives gathering in the living room for a post-party brunch and then looked back at me, her face twisting into a mask of tragic disappointment. Why are you doing this? Why do you have to come here and ruin the moment? Can't you see how happy she is? The guests turned to look. I could see the judgment in their eyes. To them, I was the bitter spinster sister who could not stand to see the baby of the family succeed. I am leaving, I said, grabbing my purse. I moved toward the door, but Marjorie caught my elbow. Her grip was like iron. She pulled me close, her perfume cloying and sweet, and whispered into my ear, If you make a fuss, if you report this, think about your compliance license. Who hires a risk officer who sues her own family? You will lose your job. Madison, I am telling you the truth. She released me and smiled at the room. Madison has to run work emergency. I stumbled out to my car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely fit the key in the ignition. I peeled out of the subdivision, my heart pounding in my throat. I checked my rearview mirror. A black sedan pulled out of the cul-de-sac 2 cars behind me. I took 3 random turns. The sedan followed. Panic flared in my chest. They were not just protecting a lie, they were enforcing it. I drove for 5 miles until I saw a busy gas station off the main highway. I swerved in at the last second, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic. The black sedan hesitated, then continued straight, disappearing into the traffic flow. I sat in my car near the air pumps, breathing hard. I watched the people pumping gas, buying snacks, living normal lives. I realized then that my emotions, the hurt, the betrayal, the desire for an apology were liabilities. My parents did not see me as a daughter. They saw me as an asset to be liquidated. I wiped a tear from my cheek and checked my reflection in the mirror. The sadness was gone. In its place was the cold, hard calculation of a woman who evaluated risk for a living. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a heist, and I was going to take the house down, brick by brick. I sat across the desk from Grant Holloway, a lawyer whose office smelled of old leather and expensive retainer fees. He was a specialist in identity theft and fraud recovery, a man who saw families destroy each other on a weekly basis. I had laid out the credit report, the mortgage inquiry, and the flight logs on his mahogany table. He studied them in silence for 10 minutes before finally looking up. "You have a textbook case of familial identity misuse," Grant said, removing his reading glasses. "But in the eyes of the law, familial fraud is messy. Police hate it. District attorneys hesitate to prosecute it because victims usually recant when grandma starts crying in court. If you want to win this, you cannot just be angry. You have to be surgical." "They threatened my job," I said, my voice steady but cold. "They said if I reported it, I would lose my clearance as a compliance officer." "That is coercion," Grant corrected, "and it means they know exactly what they are doing. Listen to me. Do not confront them again. Not yet. If you scream at them, they will shred documents and hide money. We need to build a chain of evidence. We need to know who stole the data, who filed the application, and exactly where the money is going." I left his office with a new directive. I was no longer a daughter seeking an apology. I was an auditor conducting an internal investigation. That night, I opened a spreadsheet and began to map the history of my financial interactions with my parents. It was a pattern I had been too blind to see. 5 years ago, they asked me to co-sign a car loan because their score was just a few points shy. 3 years ago, I put a utility bill in my name because of a clerical error with their account. They had been testing the waters, grooming me to be their financial safety net. I dove deeper into the mortgage details using a professional skip tracing tool I had access to through my certification. The down payment for the house was substantial. $40,000. My parents did not have $40,000 liquid. I traced the origination of the funds. The money had not come from their personal savings. It had been funneled through an LLC called Gulfline Property Services. I looked up the corporate registration for Gulfline. It was a shell company registered to a P.O. box in a strip mall in Brandon. It had no website, no employees, and no business history. Yet, it had wired a massive sum to close on Brianna's house. The structure of the fraud was elegant and terrifying. The deed to the house was in Brianna's name, meaning she owned the asset. But the mortgage liability was anchored to my credit profile through a synthetic identity mix, linking my social security number to her address. If she defaulted, the bank would come for me, but I had no legal claim to the property itself. It was theft wrapped in paperwork. Following Grant's advice, I began to document everything. I installed an app to record calls, ensuring I stated the disclaimer at the start of every conversation to comply with Florida's 2-party consent laws. "Hey, Mom, I am recording this to keep track of my work schedule and calls, just so you know," I said when she called me 2 days later. "That is weird. Madison," she said, pausing, "but fine, whatever." She had accepted the terms. Now, every manipulation would be on tape. Meanwhile, I activated my external asset, Tessa. "I am going in," Tessa told me over coffee. "I bumped into Brianna at the yoga studio. We are getting smoothies tomorrow. I am just the cool new friend who loves interior design. I will find out who is really living in that house. Be careful, I warned her. They are charming. That is how they get you. I am not signing anything, Tessa promised. I sat back in my chair and looked at the evidence board I had created on my wall. I established my rules of engagement. I would not use violence. I would not destroy Brianna if she was truly innocent. Though that possibility was shrinking by the day, my goal was precise. I was going to expose the manipulators, sever the financial cord, and reclaim my name. They wanted a gym membership. Fine, I was about to exercise my rights. The investigation was moving faster than I could process, twisting with every new piece of information Tessa and I unearthed. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was brewing coffee. It was Tessa, and she sounded breathless. "It is a cage, Madison," Tessa said, skipping the greeting. I saw the papers in Brianna's bag when she went to the bathroom at the smoothie shop. She does not own that house. Well, she is on the deed, but she signed a master lease agreement back to Gulf Line Property Services. She has to ask permission to paint a wall. She is paying rent to the shell company that paid her down payment. So they own her, I said, gripping the mug. They gave her a house to make her feel indebted, but they control the asset. I hung up and turned my attention to the name on the mortgage inquiry, Kyle Bannon. I found his number listed on a defunct real estate forum. I dialed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Bannon," a rough voice answered. "Mr. Bannon, my name is Madison Hart," I said, keeping my voice professional. "I am calling regarding a fraudulent origination file you submitted under my social security number for a property in Clearwater." There was a pause, heavy and suffocating. "I do not know who you are," he said, his tone dropping an octave. "Do not call this number again." The line went dead. When I tried to call back, it went straight to voicemail. I checked the online directory again. His profile had been deleted. He was scrubbing his tracks. I needed something older, something foundational. I remembered the external hard drive I had used to back up my father's laptop 3 years ago when it crashed. I dug it out of my closet and plugged it in. I ran a recovery on the deleted items folder. There it was, a file named Authorization Deeds Template. Docs. I opened it. It was a power of attorney draft, granting Dale Hart the right to sign on my behalf. It was dated 4 years ago. They had been planning this since I got my first promotion. Just then, my laptop chimed. The QR code from the gym membership, the one I had foolishly scanned, had installed a tracker cookie that just pinged a new location. The Vitality Benefits portal was not just harvesting data, it was active. A new alert popped up on my credit watch. New personal loan opened, Orlando, Florida, amount $5,000. They were not stopping at the house. They were bleeding me dry, one account at a time. I drove to Brianna's apartment, the old one she was packing up to leave. I pounded on the door until she opened it, looking startled. I pushed past her into the living room. "Did you know about the Orlando loan?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "Did you know they are taking out cash in my name, too?" Brianna backed away, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. "Madison, you are scaring me. They are ruining me." "Brianna," I shouted. "And you're letting them because you want a free house." She broke. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. They told me it wouldn't hurt you." She sobbed, her words coming out in choked gasps. "Mom said, she said you have plenty of money. She said you were selfish your whole life, that you never helped us, and that you deserved to be dragged down a little so we could all be equal." I stood there, feeling the air leave the room. It was not just greed, it was punishment. They resented my success, so they decided to steal it. "And you believed them," I whispered. "I just wanted the house," Brianna cried, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I am sorry. I did not know they would do the other loans." I swear. I looked at my sister. She was a beneficiary, yes, but she was also a pawn. The true architects were the ones who had raised us to turn on each other. I walked to the door. I did not forgive her. I did not comfort her. "Wash your face," I said coldly. "If you want to survive what is coming, you better stay out of their way." I walked out into the Florida heat. I was done investigating. I had the motive. I had the method. Now I needed a confession. I was going to set a trap so tempting, so perfect, that my parents would walk right into it with a smile on their faces. They wanted my credit. I was going to give them an opportunity they could not refuse. I walked into Ironclad Fitness wearing brand new workout gear, the price tag still itching against my skin. I stood by the rack of dumbbells, held up my phone, and snapped a smiling selfie. I posted it to social media with the caption, "New Beginnings." Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the push. It was the hardest lie I had ever told. But it worked. Within an hour, Marjorie liked the post. They thought I had folded. They thought I was accepting my role as the family doormat. The next step was the hook. I waited until the evening, then called my mother, making sure my voice sounded small and frantic. "Mom, I'm freaking out," I said, pacing my living room. I tried to get pre-approved for that condo downtown, but the bank said my credit score dropped to 650. They denied me. I do not know what is happening. There was a silence on the line, the kind that was heavy with calculation. "Oh, Madison, that is unfortunate," she said, her voice careful. "Maybe it is just a glitch. I do not know what to do." I whined. I really wanted that place. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dale. The bait had been taken. "Maddie, honey," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic warmth. "Mom told me about your credit trouble. Listen, I have a friend at a lending agency. We can fix this. We just need to circulate some credit to boost your utilization ratio. Why don't we meet for coffee tomorrow? I can explain how we help you." I agreed. We met at a busy coffee shop in St. Petersburg, one with high ceilings and cameras pointed at the register. I arrived early and picked a table right in the center, surrounded by witnesses. I placed my phone face down on the table, the recording app already running. Dale and Marjorie arrived 10 minutes late. They looked relaxed, confident. They thought they were coming to rescue their incompetent daughter. Dale slid a thin stack of papers across the table. "This is a bridge loan application," Dale said, tapping the paper. "It is just $10,000. If we open this in your name and pay it off immediately, your score will jump back up. I will handle the payments. You just need to authorize it." I looked at the paper. It was another trap, another debt to hang around my neck. "I am scared, Dad," I said, looking him in the eye. "I never signed for the house." "How do I know this is safe?" Dale sighed, an impatient sound that rattled in his chest. He leaned in close, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "Madison, stop being paranoid. You do not even have to read the fine print. You just need to sign this. Exactly like you signed the mortgage papers last time. Just a quick scribble. We handle the rest." My heart stopped. He had said it, like you signed the mortgage papers last time, since I had never signed them. He was admitting that the previous signature was a fabrication he controlled. "But I did not sign those papers," I said, pushing slightly. "You did." Marjorie reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her fingernails digging into my palm. "Madison," she hissed, her eyes narrowing, "if you love this family, you will stop asking questions. You will stay silent. Do you want to see your sister on the street? Do you want to ruin everything we built because you are too proud to help? We did it for you. We did it for all of us. So you admit you used my name without asking," I whispered. "We did what was necessary," Marjorie snapped, louder than she intended. A woman at the next table glanced over. Marjorie pulled back, smoothing her blouse. "Just sign the papers. Madison, don't be difficult." I stared at them. For 34 years, I had craved their approval. Now, looking at their desperate, greedy faces. I felt nothing but disgust. "I need to think about it," I said, standing up. "Sit down," Dale commanded, his voice dark. "I have to go to work," I said. I turned and walked out. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock my car door. But my face was stone. I drove 2 blocks away and pulled over. I played back the recording. "Just sign this exactly like you signed the mortgage papers last time." It was clear. It was undeniable. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my computer and filed an official identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. I uploaded the recording, the flight logs, and the credit report into a digital case file. I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus and placed a total freeze on my Social Security number. Then, I drafted an email to the fraud department of the bank holding Brianna's mortgage. I attached the police report number and the affidavit of forgery. I hit send. The shield was gone. Now, I was the sword. The fallout was not immediate like an explosion. It was slow and suffocating like a gas leak. Once the fraud alert hit the banking system, the gears of the financial industry began to grind against my family. The first casualty was Kyle Bannon, the mortgage broker. I learned later from the investigator that when the bank audit team summoned him, he did not protect his clients. He threw them to the wolves to save his license. He claimed my parents had provided him with the signed documents and he had simply processed them in good faith. My parents did not respond with remorse. They responded with a smear campaign. My phone began to vibrate with notifications from relatives I had not spoken to in years. My Aunt Linda left a voicemail that made my stomach turn. "I know you are struggling with your self-image." "Madison," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "And I know it is hard to see Brianna doing so well when you are alone, but trying to get her house foreclosed on because you are jealous, that is sick. You need help." I deleted the message, but the narrative was clear. They were spinning my legal defense as a tantrum. They were using the gym membership as proof that I was bitter about my weight and envious of Brianna's beauty and success. The consequences breached the walls of my office. The next morning, I was called into a conference room at Crown Ridge Capital Services. My boss, a stern man named David, sat with a representative from HR. "We received a flag on your security clearance." "Madison," David said, sliding a paper across the glass table. "There is a fraud investigation linked to your Social Security number. In risk compliance, you know we cannot have officers with compromised financial standing." I felt the blood drain from my face. My parents were not just stealing my credit, they were endangering my livelihood. "I am the victim. David," I said, pulling the FTC report and the police case number from my briefcase. "My identity was stolen. I am currently working with the authorities to prosecute the offenders." I handed over the files. I had to sit there for an hour, dissecting my own family trauma to prove I was not a criminal. By the time I left, I kept my job, but I had lost my dignity. That evening, Brianna showed up at my apartment. She looked wrecked, her eyes red and puffy. She did not knock. She just pounded on the wood until I opened up. "You have to stop this," she screamed, pushing past me. "The bank froze the account. They are talking about foreclosure." "Madison, please. You are ruining my life." "I am ruining nothing," I said, standing my ground in the hallway. "I am correcting a record. You guys ruined this when you forged my name. It was just a signature." Brianna cried, her hands shaking. "We were going to pay it back. Why do you have to be so rigid? Because it is a crime." "Brianna," I yelled back. She collapsed onto my floor, sobbing. "Logan is going to leave me. If we lose the house, he is going to leave me." Mentioning Logan, her fiancé, triggered something in my brain. I went back to my computer after Brianna left. I pulled up the file on Gulfline Property Services, the shell company receiving the rent payments. I dug deeper into the corporate filings, looking for the registered agent. I found a name buried in the articles of incorporation: Logan Pierce. I stared at the screen. The rental income was not just going to a random shell company. It was going to Brianna's fiancé. They were laundering the money through the house to him. My parents were financing Brianna's future husband using my credit score. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The house was a stage, the party was a performance, and the gym membership, it was a prop. They gave it to me so that if I ever spoke up, I would look like the jealous, fat sister trying to tear down the perfect couple. They had weaponized my own body against me. My phone rang. It was Grant, my lawyer. "We just received a cease and desist letter from your father's attorney," Grant said, sounding almost amused. "They are threatening to sue you for defamation of character if you do not withdraw your fraud report." "I am not withdrawing anything," I said, my voice cold as ice. "Good," Grant replied, "because a defamation suit is the best thing that could happen to us. It gives us discovery. If they sue you, they have to open their books to prove their reputation was damaged. They just invited us to audit their entire life." I looked at the screen where Logan's name glowed in the dark room. "Let them come," I said. "I am ready to burn it all down." The evidence against my family was no longer a trickle, it was a flood, and the water was rising fast. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning when I received a forwarded voice memo from Brianna. She had sent it to me in a panic, likely without thinking through the legal ramifications for her fiancé. I pressed play. The voice of Logan Pierce, Brianna's golden boy fiancé, filled my car speakers. "Babe, listen to me. You do not get it. The house stands in your name to dodge the taxes and the tracking. If they look at me or the business, we lose the cash flow. We need that property to look like a gift. Just keep your mouth shut and sign the lease back to Gulfline." I saved the file to 3 different clouds. Logan had just admitted to tax evasion and money laundering, implicating Brianna as a knowing participant. 2 hours later, Brianna called me. She was hyperventilating. "Madison, I found a bill." She gasped, the sound of tearing paper in the background. "I went to Mom's house to ask about the lease, and I saw mail on the counter. There is a credit card, a Discover card. It has my name on it, but I never applied for it. The balance is $6,000. For the first time, the illusion shattered for her. She realized she was not the cherished daughter. She was just another identity to be harvested. "Welcome to the club," I said, my voice void of sympathy. "Now you understand. You were never the favorite, Brianna. You were just the easier target because you never asked questions." "What do I do?" she sobbed. I do not want to go to jail." "Then you have to choose," I said, cutting her off. "You can stand with them and go down for fraud and conspiracy, or you can turn witness for me. If you hand over the original lease and testify that they coerced you, I might be able to keep you out of the indictment, but you have to decide right now." She cried for a full minute before whispering, "I will help you." I hung up. I had the leverage I needed. That evening, I went to the gym, not to work out, but to maintain the charade. As I walked to my car in the dimly lit parking lot, a shadow detached itself from a pillar. It was Dale. He looked older than he had a week ago. He blocked my path to the driver's side door, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Just a father, checking on his girl," he said, spreading his hands. "We need to stop this nonsense, Madison. The lawyers, the banks. It is costing us a fortune. We are family. You stole my identity," I said, unlocking the car. His smile vanished. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "You are playing a dangerous game," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You think you are smart? You are just a lonely girl trying to hurt people who love her. If you do not drop this claim by tomorrow, you will lose everything. Your job, your reputation. I will make sure everyone knows you are unstable." I looked at him. I did not flinch. I did not feel the old fear that used to paralyze me when he raised his voice. "I have saved everything," I said calmly. I got into my car and locked the door. I watched him stand there in the rearview mirror, shrinking into the darkness as I drove away. He did not know that the dash cam in my car had recorded the entire interaction. When I got home, Grant sent me a new file from the bank's discovery packet. It contained the supporting documents for the mortgage application. I clicked on the PDF labeled ID verification. It was a scan of my driver's license, but it was not my current one. It was my license from 5 years ago, the one I thought I had lost during a move. I zoomed in. I could see the distinct scratch on the laminate over my left eye. A memory flashed back to me. I was 29, visiting my parents. I had been looking for my purse, and my mother had said, "Oh, let me keep your important papers in the safe. Just for safekeeping. You know how you lose things." She had not been protecting my documents. She had been archiving them for future use. They had planned this for half a decade, waiting for my credit score to be high enough to harvest. I picked up my phone. It was time to end it. I sent a text to the family group chat, including Brianna, Dale, Marjorie, and Logan. Family meeting, Sunday at 1 in the afternoon, at Brianna's new house. I am ready to apologize and drop the case. Let's talk. It was the lie they wanted to hear. They would come expecting a surrender. Instead, they were walking into an execution. The Sunday sun beat down on the driveway of the new house in Clearwater, baking the pavement. Inside, the air conditioning was humming, but the atmosphere was suffocating. My parents had invited everyone: Aunt Linda, Uncle Bob, even a few cousins I had not seen since Christmas. They sat on the plush furniture, sipping iced tea, looking at me with a mixture of pity and expectation. Dale and Marjorie sat in the center of the living room, like monarchs holding court. They thought I was there to apologize. They thought I was there to fold. "I am glad you came to your senses, Madison," Dale said, leaning back with a satisfied smirk. "We are family. We forgive you for the outburst." I stood by the fireplace. I did not sit. "I do want to congratulate Brianna," I said, my voice steady. "And I also want to return the gift you gave me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gym membership card. I flicked it onto the glass coffee table. It spun and settled with a sharp plastic click. "I do not need to work on my figure," I said. I needed to work on my boundaries. Before Dale could respond, I tapped the screen of my phone, which was already connected to the Bluetooth speaker system I had gifted Brianna years ago. The audio from the coffee shop filled the room, crisp and undeniable. "Just sign this exactly like you signed the mortgage papers last time." The silence that followed was absolute. Aunt Linda froze with her glass halfway to her mouth. Marjorie's face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Dale stood up abruptly, his face twisting into a snarl. He lunged toward me, his hand outstretched to grab the phone. "Turn that off!" he roared. "Please step back!" a deep voice commanded from the hallway. Grant Holloway stepped into the living room, followed closely by a man in a dark suit holding a thick leather folio. It was the financial investigator from the state attorney's office. The air in the room shifted instantly from awkward tension to terrified realization. "Dale and Marjorie Hart," the investigator said, his voice flat and professional. "I am executing a warrant for the seizure of financial documents related to identity theft and mortgage fraud." Brianna made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked at Logan, then at me. She burst into tears, her composure shattering. "I cannot go to jail," she sobbed, digging into her purse. She pulled out a crumpled sheaf of papers and the printouts of her text with Logan. Here is the lease back to Gulf Line and the text "they made me do it." Logan tried to stand, his hands up in a placating gesture. "Now hold on, I didn't know." We matched the deposit signatures. "Mr. Pierce," the investigator cut him off. "Sit down." I looked at my parents. They were shrinking, looking small and vicious. I walked over to the table and picked up the gym card again. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked softly. "It wasn't the money. It was the distraction. You gave me this membership so I would focus on my weight instead of my credit score. You wanted me to feel so insecure, so unworthy, that I wouldn't dare question why my life felt so heavy. You needed me to hate myself, so I wouldn't hate you." I dropped the card into the trash can next to the sofa. "You are betraying this family," Dale screamed. veins bulging in his neck as the investigator moved toward him. After everything we did for you, no one stood up for him. The cousins looked at the floor. Aunt Linda looked away. The evidence was not a rumor. It was right there in the recording and the terrified confession of his youngest daughter. The investigator recited the Miranda warning, the words mechanical and final. You have the right to remain silent. Marjorie looked at me, tears finally streaming down her face. But they were tears of self-pity, not regret. Madison, she whispered. How could you destroy us? I looked her in the eye. I felt no guilt, only a vast, cool relief. I did not break this family. Mom, I said. I just stopped being the shield. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting tight cut through the room. I turned and walked out the front door as the heavy lock clicked shut behind me. Thanks so much for listening to this story. That was a wild ride. Wasn't it? I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So drop a comment down below with your city or country. It is always awesome to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this takedown, please smash that like button, hit the hype button to help more people find this video, and make sure you are subscribed to Victoria Revenge Stories for more satisfying justice. Catch you in the next one.